Hey book nerds, welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be a look at a few books that I would recommend in terms of reading in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. So it's not all non-fiction or anti-racist books. There's some fiction in there by Black and people of colour authors, to try and, uplift and amplify some voices that you might not have otherwise considered reading. So I'll start with the specifically anti-racist, non-fiction books. One of which I would say is Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall, and the subtitle being Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot. So this is looking at the different intersectionalities of society and how white Western feminism forgets these people. So black women, black people, people of colour, trans people, queer people, disabled people, all of that, all within this one book. So I would definitely recommend giving that a read. One that isn't new, it's not recent, it came out quite a number of years ago, although it looks like it was republished in 2018. It's Audre Lorde's The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. And this is a selection of essays looking at things like gender, colour, power, oppression, discrimination, all this sort of thing. I've read some of the essays purposely for my master's. Forgot the word there. Doing well. And I would definitely recommend it. They're very powerful, moving essays, and it's very upsetting and depressing that these were written so long ago and yet they could have been written yesterday. Such is the lack of change that we have had in our societies to reduce racism and gender inequality and basically trying to dismantle the patriarchy, and it hasn't really gone anywhere because, So if you want more of a British perspective, I would recommend Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. Obviously this looks at British society, and while Black Lives Matter as a movement kind of comes from America, it was set up over there, and it was primarily and originally in reaction to police brutality and the aggression and murdering of black people by cops. There is still a lot of racism pretty much everywhere in the world, and there's a lot of British society that reckons, we're not racist because we're not out shooting black people in the street. And it's like, well, just because we don't have mass ownership of guns is probably the only reason for that. That doesn't mean we're not racist. So Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race gives you a bit more of a British black woman's perspective, which is, I think, important to remember, or important to specifically seek out if you think racism is just a problem in America, because it's not. So that's the specifically non-fiction anti-racist books. I know there's only 3 there. There are a lot out there. There are a lot of resource lists. There are a lot of recommendation lists that you can find. Google it. It'll be easy to find. I mentioned these 3 because they're not necessarily popping up on all of the lists, and I just thought if you've come across any lists but you haven't come across these three, maybe give them a consideration, maybe give them a chance. In terms of fiction, Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. I haven't read it yet, but I really want to. It's been praised by various people, including Neil Gaiman, but I'm not that fussed about him, so if you are, then, you know. It's got a lot of people calling it extraordinary, and it, from the synopsis that you get, it kind of brings in a lot of Africa and African cultural elements into into a fantasy setting. And it is, I believe, the first part of a trilogy, if not just a duology. It looks really chunky. It is quite chunky, actually. Ooh. It's over 600 pages, but it just, like, I have not heard a single bad word about this book. So this is by, as I say, Marlon James. So you've got a little picture of him in the back. Fantasy, go for it. Crime, thriller, serial killer-y style. My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2019, so it's still fairly new. It came, I believe it came out last year. If not, it came out, you know, very late 2018. What does it say? This paperback edition published in 2019, so copyright 2017, 2018. So the hard copy probably came out a little bit earlier than that. Again, highly recommended. I have not seen a bad word about it anywhere. It's by another black author. Crime, thrillery stuff. I believe it's set in Nigeria. Yeah, it's set in Nigeria. So it's a crime, it's a thriller, it's a serial killer book that isn't set in America, and it isn't set in the UK, and it's not set in white Western territory of any description. Going to be fun. Hoping to read this month. In terms of short, I'll go back to fantasy again, actually, because I think it's very important to remind people that there are other fantasy authors out there who are not transphobic, given recent, rather famous white wizard book lady going full-on anti-trans on Twitter. So I'll mention a few more fantasy books by authors of colour, sorry. So one that I have been wanting to read for a while is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is, like, the premise is that this race of Mer people are descended from black African pregnant women who were chucked overboard from slave ships, and the unborn children sort of adapted, and when they were birthed were merfolk. And it's a story that also deals with the importance and the cultural significance, and I can't think of the word, of audio storytelling, so verbal storytelling. I know there's a proper term for it, but I can't remember what it is. So, like, making sure that people remember their own history through storytelling between people, not written down, spoken word storytelling, spoken history, and that kind of is, I find that very interesting as a concept and something to look into, because oral storytelling, oral history, that's the word. Oral histories are still very important in a lot of non-white settings. So I think that's going to be a very key element that River Solomon is going to bring to this fantasy book. The Binti series, there's 3. They're all very short little novellas. There's Binti, which is the first one, Home, which is the second one, and then The Night Masquerade, which is the third one. And they're by Nnedi Okorafor. Apologies if I've pronounced it poorly. So yeah, the first one is only 96 pages on the ebook, so you can probably get through them pretty quickly. It's a kind of sci-fi, as opposed to just a fantasy. Binti, the main character, is the first of her people to be able to go to a university, which is the most esteemed higher education institution in the galaxy. So this is several years after, first contact and humans of, trying to make their way among the stars. And she's trying to achieve her success in a situation where people don't necessarily understand her. And I think it's going to be a pretty good sci-fi allegory for just general going to... So it's kind of a steampunky sci-fi fantasy type alternate history, which is called The Black God's Drums by J. P. Clark. And it's set in the American Civil War, except with steampunky stuff going on. And the ultimate weapon is going to be the Black God's drums. To me, it sounds interesting. It's also fairly short. It's only got, let me check, 112 pages, so it's another short one like Binti, so it's not going to take you very long to read it. And I think that's, if something's short and it's not going to take you long to read it, and it's going to educate you in some way and give you a bit more variety in your reading, then why not? Finally, a couple of non-sci-fi things, non-fantasy, so just like literary. Black Sunday by Tola Rotimi Abraham. This doesn't come out till August in the UK. It's about 2 sisters, and it kind of sounds very similar to The Vanishing Half, which I will also mention, but this is based in Nigeria, and it's 2 sisters who, I believe their father dies, and then their mother loses their fairly, middle class house and life, and then they have to go live with family who are very religious. And then it follows the 2 sisters as they grow up, as one of them, as the blurb says, embraces modernity, and the other one sticks to her more traditional religious life that she's come to following a tragedy when they were younger. And the differences between the 2 sisters and how their lives progress and interact. Then The Vanishing Half, as I just said, also about 2 sisters. This is by Britt Bennett. This is about 2 sisters in America from I don't know if it's like the Deep South, but it's from like a southern black community. One of the sisters leaves and is white passing, and then her husband doesn't know anything about her previous life. Her sister stays in the black community, and what happens as their lives progress and interact in different ways. So those 2 books, both about sisters, both of whom taking different paths, one set in Nigeria, one set in the United States. Both, I think, are going to be very interesting in offering, contrasts between different roads that people can take and the different, problems that they encounter. Both by black authors. Hey everyone, just before I wrap up the video, I have a brain like a sieve, basically. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't write a list down. I was just trying to do it from memory, so I completely forgot about 2 great authors. First of all, N.K. Jemisin, who writes fantasy, kind of sci-fi novels, trilogies. series, and I would definitely recommend the Broken Earth series. And also, if you are fancying something that's free to get a taste, then Emergency Skin is free on Kindle, which she wrote, and it's brilliant, and definitely check her out. Second, Bernardine Evaristo, who wrote Girl, Woman, Other, which won the Man Booker Prize last year, in conjunction with Margaret Atwood, but we're going to forget about her because meh. So definitely go check those two out, and thanks. Forgive me for my forgetfulness as well. Cheers, guys. Back to the video. So thanks very much for listening. I will pop a link to some more Black Lives Matter material and resources in the description, and I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found some new things that you might like to read. As always, like, subscribe, share if you fancy, and I'll see you next time. So thank you very much. Bye.